gentlemen, we hope we've given you a rich meal. We're looking forward to your questions. Madam.
Chairman of wonderful comments, however very long on problems, and perhaps not long enough on solutions. And I wonder whether there isn't an opportunity here for Canada or other democracies to look at Ukraine and a model of the world in the future. Because if democracy does not work in Ukraine, you start with the arrest of the opposition leaders, and then the elections are made fraudulent, and then down to the fact that sovereignty of another aspiring democracy is lost. What hope is there in the entire former Soviet space? And then let's expand that. Let's expand that to the Arab Spring. Surely, all of our democracies that have been in existence for 300 years need to come together to figure out what are the next steps for this world. And I wonder if anybody might be able to comment on a new paradigm for this serious, overwhelming problem.
Who would like to tackle that question?
Thank you.
It's serious. Let's have dinner first and we'll think about it.
Well, I think as you can see that certain questions have too many implications and will be answered immediately. Please.
Thank you. What is getting of the Canadian President of this association? Mr. Nalyvaichenko and other speakers spoke today and mentioned the importance of youth. I sit on the board of a foundation that makes them 20 to 30 students support with our parliamentarians and parliamentarians for a couple months a year. And in that, I've noticed over the years a small but growing and disturbing set of trends. One is the growing acceptance of the current political situation in Ukraine as normal and therefore not to be challenged. As part of that, there is also what the Germans used to call in the 1930s an inner migration. In other words, a complete dissociation from a sort of political, social, or community activity and more and more concentration on personal development and non-controversial cultural activity. So what I'm looking for are concrete suggestions from anyone on the panel, or for that matter, anyone in the room, on how we can counteract that form of thinking, those trends, and institutions that we can have. Thank you.
Well, there is a question that is addressed to everyone. Does anyone like to tackle that? How to challenge people who have gone into inner hibernation or inner migration and who are accepting the situation? James, you look as if you have some thoughts.
Well, I asked myself the same question and I don't yet have an answer to it. And I'm just asking myself another question because this is a very, very serious problem. Are there certain game changes that could occur in Ukraine that would snap people out of this type of torpor and depression? You know, one thing that's come across in our discussions that is even with this, not thanks to the internet, Ukrainian civil society is as well informed as it's ever been. But they're not very active, and I think part of the inactivity is rational because they don't see any particular group or leader that they can support. This is the problem with this notion that you can somehow tweet your way into a revolution. It's something almost required, particularly if you're dealing with countries like Ukraine and Russia, which are not like Libya, that have very serious, well-aggregated, well-developed, articulated institutions. Would the death of Yulia Tymoshenko and Fraser be a trigger that would bring people out? Would joining the customs union with Russia produce a number of high-profile resignations in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a number of other people who would start to mobilize? I don't have an answer to that, but some kind of game changer would be needed, I think.
Any other comments? I would say, in an additional remark, that simply by having these exchanges and opening their eyes to other realities, you're contributing to a critical mass of our ultimately political responsible citizens. Sir.
To Kyiv. I have two questions, if I may. One on the poll and the second one in March 2010 when, as you probably remember, the government was formed with this blatant violation of the Constitution, and this was tacitly accepted by the EU. Not a single signal came from Brussels, and probably it was received by public officials and by the government as a carte blanche for further violations of Constitution laws and so on. So we got what we got. This is question number one. Second question to Mr. But as far as I remember, you had been the head of the security service again for 2 years or so. And if I'm right, probably both Mr. Crossroads and Canadian had been your subordinates at the time. Didn't their previous loyalty or allegiance worry you at the time? And was there any possibility to fundamentally change the security service of Ukraine to make today's restructurization and recognization of the service impossible, or at least not so easy as it happened? And the extension of this question, why do Orange politicians believe that Ukrainian electorate should support them, despite the fact they proved to be so inefficient and responsible, and not a single of them goes to the people, I am sorry.
I think we have two questions here. Amanda, I think you were the first. Did you get the first one? Yeah. Okay.
Well, regarding the EU in 2010, I mean, I believe that in the first place, the EU was gratified to have political stability back in Ukraine. But more than that, I think they wanted to give President Yanukovych a second chance, or maybe a third chance. So for most of 2010, I have to say that I think it's already been pointed out by one of the previous speakers, there was actually some reforms that were done. Ukraine actually met what they called the Stefan Fuller short-term matrix, I think that's what it was called, of reforms. So they did give some signals that they were prepared to carry out EU-demanded reforms. And the summit at the end of 2010 was actually quite a joyous occasion between Ukraine and the EU. It was actually seen as one of the most positive summits that they'd had for a very long time. So I do believe it actually took the EU several months to understand that President Yanukovych could give them a second chance or a third chance, but really he hadn't changed that much from how he was the last time he was in office as Prime Minister, which is why you didn't really see such a reaction coming from the EU until you get into 2011, when signs from Ukraine became far more serious than they had been in 2010, and as we know, they continued in a downward spiral until now.
Thank you very much. Nalyvaichenko.
Thank you. As to Mr. Harashkovsky, he used to be the head of our administration of customs administration, appointed by Nalyvaichenko. And then, after this position, of course, for me it was quite acceptable to get him as my first deputy on my being in the office of SBU head. He was responsible, by the way, in the SBU year 2009 on combating contraband, illegal movement of goods and human beings. So that's up to him why he changed and what kind of obligations he took from Mr. Yanukovych, who appointed him as a head of SBU. As to the decativization, I think that it's among the top priorities, used to be and still in Ukraine. And I think the main things should be done is that to change the legislation and to pass in the parliament a new draft or a new law on security service of Ukraine, clearly mentioning that this counterintelligence with no other functions, especially no investigation functions or any other functions from previous, let's say, KGB or other, let's say, Soviet agencies should be SBU should be deprived of any of such KGB functions. That's my understanding and my position. As to the Orange electorate, let me say that I joined the political party of Ukraine a year and a half before, a year and a half still in the office in the party. So my answer is to understand why people were disappointed by orange, let's say, politicians doing or arguing among themselves and doing nothing to the country. That's the main issue, the main answer that should be answered before the elections. That's how I understand the approach.
We're now entering a danger zone. We've got time for perhaps 2 very short questions and 2 very short answers. Sir.
A Roman servant. As a historian, I like to thank Nalyvaichenko for being instrumental in the KGB archive. Now, after spending 2 days listening very carefully, very quietly to all the discussions, and making the first question and intervention, I have a short comment and a much shorter question. My comment is, in response to Poland's Ukraine, it seems to me that Ukraine is heading or is struggling between 2 groups to integration. Integration either into the Russian world, and I think the integration is much more serious than just a satellite or even a republic. It's a complete integration. If we think of the role of the Orthodox Church, or integration into the Ukrainian Commonwealth, here again, Commonwealth in the sense of either a family capital or a Commonwealth, national Commonwealth. Now, the second integration is political integration. It's again into the regions, the variety of regions, and their way of integrating all the other politicians, buying off and so on. Or is it integrating Ukrainian democratic forces into one force, one political force that will take over the other integration of Ukraine into Ukrainian society? Now, my question is very sort of maybe provocative, but my question is the following. When will the Ukrainian elites, political elites in Ukraine, say publicly to themselves and to the Ukrainian nation, unless we unite in one force, and I don't mean a coalition that will be looking for little abortions, little but into one political party and present ourselves to that election. Otherwise, we are betraying the Ukrainian nation. When will the Ukrainian elites the political elites have the courage to say that to themselves and to the Ukrainian nation? Until this happens, everything else is secondary.
My answer is very short. Nalyvaichenko actually announced this united list of opposition. I am among the politicians who fully support this idea, but my obligation is not only to talk about that, but to do, to make it possible to get opposition to be united during these elections without no doubts of that. Thank you.
Do I have... Oh, sorry, Ariel.
Real quick, if you look at the historic track record, as I tend to do when I examine behavior of national leaders, unfortunately, if you look at the 17th century or the early 20th century, the post-Romanov disintegration era, sometimes these opposition leaders either never unite, or when they unite, it's too late. I hope that this time they will unite before it's too late. Thank you.
Do I have the indulgence of the audience to allow for what appear to be 3 remaining questions? Are you have a question, yes? Do I have the indulgence of the audience?
Of course.
4 questions? Madam. And these should be questions, not comments.
From Chicago, I'm president of the Canadian and NATO Foundation of America. I'd like to thank the distinguished speakers and organizers for this excellent conference and also for the hearings yesterday in Parliament. The reason that I wanted to just mention one more point is that Today is International Women's Day. I think that we should be outraged by the comments of the Speaker of the House, the President, and the Prime Minister regarding the status of women in Ukraine and the lack of women in leadership positions. My question is, since the arrest, imprisonment, and harassment for the last many years of Nalyvaichenko deal also with this issue of women in Ukraine, I would like to know whether the next election, without the participation of the top opposition leader taking part in it, can be considered democratic and fair election.
Answer is very short as well. Of course not. If Julia Tymoshenko, Yulia will be behind the bars.
Louder, we can hear.
If Yulia Tymoshenko, Yulia will be behind the bars, of course no. We cannot name any such elections to be free and fair. That's why we, with the international community, clearly demand them to be free before the elections and let them participate in elections as a political leaders, as a leader, as a protocol about Julia Tymoshenko, as a leader of common and united list of the opposition. So to be number one, but I think that. Thank you.
Mr. Lange, you have a question.
I'm tempted to play ping pong on Germany, but I'd like to just remind you that Germany, together with the US and Canada, is one of the biggest donors in military assistance in Ukraine and is the biggest investor if you exclude Cyprus, is doing much more on the ground for democracy and rule of law than many others who are rhetorically supporting Ukraine. But that aside, since this is a panel about strategy that has been mentioned to me many times at the conference again by Madam Hall, let's start quoting James Sherr and let's imagine the unthinkable will happen and the European Union will make a strategic decision to grant membership perspective to Ukraine, maybe the preamble of the agreement it will sign. How will this unfold? What will change in Ukraine with this? How will it understood by Ukrainian society, Ukrainian elites as a signal not to continue as before, but actually to shift?
How did Romania get their membership? I'd like to ask you a question. How did
Who
Romania...
wishes to tackle that question?
Well, I think it's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What would happen if they get the membership perspective? But I believe that it's actually worth finding out, because I don't see what damage it would actually do. Ukraine can continue as they are at the moment and do nothing, but maybe there's a chance that it's actually going to be the signal that is going to drive all of the political elites together, because after all, it's the one thing that apparently all of Ukraine's politicians have actually supported for many years, but they haven't actually been given the possibility yet to actually try get together and go for it. And I think it's about time that the EU actually did give them that opportunity, the same opportunity that's been given to the Western Balkans, Ukraine's neighbours and the Baltics. Why not to Ukraine?
We've been here recently before. The same arguments were made about Ukraine's accession to the WTO. The WTO would automatically change the economic system in Ukraine. What has happened since Ukraine joined the WTO? It's not even that the status quo has been maintained, it is deteriorated.
Exactly, that's what it is. Exactly. Why did Romania join and how?
I think at this point...
Can I just make another comment? Sorry.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to say that every country that has been given a clear EU perspective has actually transformed, has actually modernized, and things have changed. Why are we automatically saying that this would not happen with Ukraine? I think again this is an example of a different approach. No, I was comparing the WTO is completely different, frankly speaking.
Yeah.
In the decade after Ukraine became the first time in Ukraine's independence, articles appeared in the press saying, threatening that there was a danger of explosions, violent explosions in Ukraine. Crimea, eastern Ukraine, these kinds of things. In the last 10 years, or the last, not counting the last couple of years, those articles have stopped, but they're starting again. Is there a danger of violence in Ukraine? And if so, would the Ukrainian armed forces, the security forces of Ukraine, would they step in, or would they, remain on the sidelines and say, let society sort it out?
Thank you, Yaroslav. My answer would be we should expect, as well as Mr. Yanukovych, growing social protests, especially in Eastern Ukraine. Definitely, militia will step in. Definitely, riot police or special riot militia will do their, in brackets, best to stop such protests. So we don't expect, let's say, quiet summer, but quiet, let's say, September, October. So we do expect about social protests.
And now for the last question.
Thank you. It will be a short question. And I'm opening it up to the audience and to the panel as a question we can discuss at the reception afterwards. I want to piggyback on Mr. Sherr's notion of game changers. Game changers can be either accidental or they can be designed and planned. The Orange Revolution was a planned game changer. It got out 1 million people onto Maidan. It got out 5,000 people on Bloor Street in front of the Ukrainian consulate in Toronto. But the planning for that started in 2002.
Well, the question.
My question is, can we discuss potential game changers that could influence Ukraine and Russia over the next 6 months or so, or a year in the reception afterwards?
Well, there is a challenge for an incentive to get to the reception. And at this point, we apologize to the next speaker for having taken a bit of his time, and we would, I think, you want to come up, Jan?
Yeah.